These are two of the sisters of Tyree.
I'm going to take this time to just share some things that you guys may not know about my baby brother. It's very hard to stand here, so bear with me. Tyree was my baby brother. Him and I are 11 years apart.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in and joining You and the Law podcast show. We're streaming live on Facebook Live. We are continuing our podcast show from last week after the tragic video that was released of Tyre Nichols, who was killed in Memphis, Tennessee by 5 Black police officers. So we're going to be talking about, because, Thursday, Keith, the video was released Friday, and there's been a lot of that video caused a lot of emotions, a lot of trauma with a lot of people. Of course, the funeral was yesterday. I was trying to play a portion of the audio clip from one of the sisters who had a poem that was very. It was a poem that really touched everything that this family has been dealing with since the death of their brother. A mother lost her son. I'm hoping I can get that pulled up, because it's that the poem the sister wrote, Keith, was it touched on some things, and I don't know if you were able to hear the sister read that poem, but it was very it just goes to show you how these 5 police officers changed this entire family's life.
Well, Virgil, good evening to the listeners. Not just the family's life, but the entire nation, the way the entire nation looks at law enforcement, once again, as it relates to excessive force. And unfortunately, in the death of this young man. And I've started a hashtag know his name, Tyre Nichols. Each time I put something out, I'm going to continue to put that out until people realize what an amazing young man this was, and the fact that he was taken too soon and tragically. And that, one of the things I really did admire about his mom, she said that she has some peace knowing that her son's death will not be in vain, and that it will bring about change in law enforcement, proactive change in law enforcement. But, man, I tell you, it was Al Sharpton said it best yesterday. I don't think people understand the relationship between a black man and their mother, black men and their mothers.
Correct.
The fact that sometimes that's the line of hope. That's the line of hope that young black men have, the line of strength. As you said, he was trying to get home to his mom, to places that a person that you feel is going to always keep you safe, and a place where you always feel safe. So I thought that was really, those are some dynamic words that he put out yesterday as this young man was laid to rest.
Yeah, Keith, and I just think it's, for any family, where now it's the Nichols family. Before it was the George Floyd's family. Before it was Breonna Taylor's family. It was,
the young man in Aurora. The young man in Aurora.
Young man in Aurora.
Sandra
Bland, and I just saw a video that was released out of California where an amputated man, doubly amputated, who had got into some type of a physical assault with somebody who he used a knife on. Multiple police officers shot him over 10 times. And this is a double amputee man who a citizen caught on their cell phone on the sidewalk, and the police officer shot and killed him. And this man, again, there is, we always talk about the use of less lethal force. And where was that at? And I don't know if you've seen that video, Keith, but it's another disturbing video.
Virgil, let me ask you a question, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but why is it when police chiefs or the community bring up potential excessive force, deadly force that does not appear to be justified? We know Tyre Nichols incident was not justified. We know George Floyd incident. We know Eric Garner's. We know this. This is things that we see. We see everything on TV. We see the video. They do studies. We see all the discussions about it. But why is it that you have some law enforcement officers who think that we're wrong because we say that was excessive force? Now we're looking at it from, and I'll tell you, man, we've both been street officers. I've been a street officer. I've been a training officer. I've been a recruiter. I've been a street sergeant on all 3 shifts. Been internal affairs sergeant. Been a patrol commander. I've been an investigative commander. I've worked at Vice Narcotics. I worked in Vice. I worked all that. The thing that gets me, the thing that bothers me the most, the things that bother me the most is that from our viewpoint, we've seen all the levels.
Correct.
And so we're able to, from our viewpoint, we can see it from all levels, from that first line all the way up to that supervisor rank. And we come back and we say, this was not justified. Then you and I are accused of being anti-police.
Anti-police.
You and I are accused of not caring for our officers.
Correct.
Not one time have we ever said that this is not a tough job. Not one time have we ever said that the use of force up to deadly force may be justified. Every situation is different. But when you have a situation like Tyre Nichols, you have a situation like Botham James, you have a situation like the young man in California, the amputee, the double amputee, when you have that situation and you say that was unnecessary, it's sort of like you have just completely disrespected the profession by saying that. Yeah. And I'm wondering what videos or what video are you watching when you say that this is justified? When you say that we don't have all the facts. So what facts do you need that Tyre Nichols was beaten to death? What facts do you need? What facts do you need that the reports were false? The offense reports that were written were completely false. Yeah. What facts do you need when they say, I hope they stomp him? You're referring to this man, MF. And then at the same other time, you're not providing this man medical attention.
Correct.
So what have you and I said wrong when we say that they were responsible for this man's death? How does that qualify us to not be pro-police?
Keith, it's really good you brought that up, brother, because I have been called as of recently, or been told as of recently, that I'm anti-cop. And I don't know, and I'm going to ask you this question. Is it because of the messenger? Or is it because we're seeing we're seeing the same things through the same lenses? And I'm going to ask you this question, and this is not about, I don't want people who are listening to think that, you're trying to, here you go, bringing up race in it. Is this a potential, we're seeing things through the same lens, but are we seeing it through a black lens, and are people seeing it through a white lens?
Well, I will tell you this, Virgil. Sometimes you wonder, and I think I can say this and people understand what I'm saying. I think that there's a small group of individuals who believe that we always side with people who look like us. So there's an automatic assumption that because Tyre was African-American, that we're going to automatically side with him no matter what. That's totally false. It would have been the same thing if Tyree Nichols had been white. It would have
Or
been the same
Hispanic.
thing if Tyree Nichols had been white and those officers had been white. It'd be the same thing. The
Yeah.
fact of it is, this man was murdered. It doesn't matter what he did before. If he did anything before, it doesn't appear he did anything. There doesn't appear to be any justification for the stop. So we got to stop this. Well, you're going to say this. We also have to stop when you decide that you're going to have empathy for that family and that you are siding with the bad guy.
Yeah.
The fact that all the attention must go to the police. And I'm a firm believer. I've been in that situation where you have to, we're there for our people every day.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you don't have the empathy for this family, because this family did lose someone. Yes, that officer it's the same thing when we lose an officer in the line of duty. You have empathy for that family. You have empathy for the family. You've missed, that's part of life. If you're not empathetic, then you have a problem. I think sometimes we lose that sense of us when we pin on the badge. We lose that sense of empathy. And at the end of the day, when you start saying things like, well, we don't have all the facts, I don't want to pass judgment, that's a problem. As a police chief, we're not armchair quarterback in this situation. It's not like we were just going through, picking up a video, just randomly looking at video and saw this. This was brought to the attention of the nation.
Yeah.
All the facts were brought to the attention of the nation. And then we do have a right to say, this is wrong, this is right. I mean, this is wrong. This is why this is wrong. This is going to tarnish the badge. No matter what, even though you had 5 officers, it does tarnish the entire profession. But it does get frustrating when every time you look up, law enforcement officers antagonize chiefs because they have a human side, and because we're able to say, yeah, something different could have taken place.
Yeah.
So they could have handled that a lot differently. What's wrong with that? It's a known fact, Virgil, that in law enforcement, we do spend more time in the academy teaching our officers to shoot than we do de-escalation tactics.
It's good you bring that up. Yeah, it's facts. It's facts.
That's not. I mean, as a police chief, I've signed off on ammunition budgets. I looked at the curriculum for the entire academy, and we do spend more time teaching officers about weapon retention and things like that. We do that. We don't. We do not. We need to do a better job of enhancing de-escalation, CIT training, crisis intervention training, cultural diversity training, cultural sensitivity training based on ethnicity, gender, religious beliefs, sexual orientation. We do need more training of that nature. We do. So that's just fact.
Yeah. Well, Keith, and it's good you brought that up. I mean, you brought up two things that I was going to bring up because, being accused of being anti-cop when you're a cop. And then also, I've made a comment on social media recently about what took place in Memphis with the murder of Tyree Nichols, where I stated that we spend, and just as you stated, we spend thousands and thousands of dollars on our budgets on buying bullets. We spend hundreds and hundreds of hours on the range teaching officers how to shoot to kill a person.
No.
Well, I'm not, but just shoot to eliminate the threat. Shoot to eliminate the threat.
Right.
But we do not spend the same amount of money to train officers on how to deal with people with mental health illness, how to deal with people with just how to talk to people. All of that's out. And I stated that if you are one of those officers who you're not a good person to shoot a weapon, you're going to kind of be isolated from the other group. And then you got a firearms instructor who is in your ear about dry firing, trigger pull, all these basic things. And now, if you don't successfully pass that, you can be terminated. Well, but Keith, hold on a second. But you will not be terminated because you didn't get the additional hours of mental health training, or you won't be terminated for taking some type of sensitivity class, but you'll get but we will terminate you for not getting that 70%, or some agencies even higher than 70%.
Well,
but people get offended by that, Keith, because it's like, well, now you don't sound like a cop. But we got to look at where the things that we've been doing, Keith, over the last decades and decades, they have not worked. They've actually gotten worse. But how do you, and this is, to me, is also a part of police reform.
So let me ask you this, Virgil. And hey, Myrna, hey, Pam, how y'all doing?
Myrna, she makes a point about, Myrna, I make this comment, Myrna, that God, believe me, God has a way of doing things. What was the chances of Tyre Nichols running into that neighborhood where there was a sky pole camera on that? Keith, that just, I mean, there are places strategically throughout the city, as you know, but there was something that God said, you're going to run this way. And it just so happened it ended right there. It didn't end up the street, farther down. It just seemed, if that had not happened there, this would be a whole totally different conversation.
Well, it would be a whole, I think you wouldn't have gotten the full story. Let me say this, and just to let you know, to the listeners, how much I believe these officers were zoned in on the attack of this young man. If you're not familiar with these pole cameras, they have a bright blue light that
you know it. Yeah.
And so even during the day, you can see the light. So to me, they were so focused on their adrenaline. They were adrenaline driven toward the task of beating this man and humiliating this man, that they really and truly, I really believe, they didn't realize that camera was there until later.
One of them pointed their flashlight up to the camera. Afterward, yeah.
Afterwards, after the damage had been done.
Yeah.
Let me say this, man. So when I went through the police academy back in '88, we had a firearms instructor who had never been on this. He was a sergeant, and he had probably been on the street of his 20-some years on the street. Well, his 15 years on the street at that time, he had probably been on the street as a patrol officer, probably like 6 months, maybe a year. But he was an amazing marksman. And when I got into law enforcement, that's what it was all about. It was that deal where, and I'm so glad now police departments have gone to more of a unified gun base. So you're going to carry Glocks, you're going to carry SIG, you're going to carry Smith & Wesson, you're going to carry, everybody carries the same weapon. So I'm so glad, because I came through the era where you had some people carrying revolvers, some carrying semi-automatics, some carrying 45 automatics, 9mm. But you had a guy that's all he talked about. He took almost a month of firearms. So the academy at that time was 20 weeks long.
Mm-hmm.
But you took 160 hours of firearms training. Okay, you took 2 hours of, there really wasn't anything that dealt with mental illness. It was basically dealing with how do you do an emergency detention on someone. And that was really new back then. Yeah. So nobody really was excelled in that area. But 160 hours, that's a month worth of training, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's all you did, train retention, shooting, dry firing, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so he had built people up to think that that was the only way that you could survive out here on the street, that you had to be able to shoot, not de-escalate, not conversation, not, less lethal. It was basically you shoot. And he made a comment that you shoot to kill. It wasn't shoot to stop back then. It was shoot to kill.
Well, and that's, I didn't, we've heard that.
Yeah, let me finish this. Not to cut you off. Let me just finish because I want to get this out. But basically, now you've done that, and then once you graduated the academy at that point, you went through what was called 2 weeks of officer survival school. And in officer survival school, every scenario was based on either an officer getting shot or killed or a suspect getting shot or killed. There was no way around it. Somebody was going to get shot or killed. So now you take these young rookies and you put them out there and you go through this and you pump them up. And this is what you're going to face on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Now, you got to throw a little bit of ingredient in there about this housing project over here. You're probably going to end up killing somebody over here. Now you take rookies and you put them out there and you tell them, go out and save the city. Yeah. Okay. That's what we're still trying to overcome. I'm not saying that's happening every day. I'm not saying, but I will tell you that is the way that law enforcement used to train on a regular basis. It was about you get them before they get you. Tried by 12 instead of carried by 6. That was I'm going home every day.
Yeah.
Some people understand that. You and I understand what that means. Some people can't. They can't. They can't maneuver their way through that. That's a last resort.
Yeah.
They can't. Yeah. We look at that. That's the first resort. But Virgil, just going back, let's talk about this. Well, you had something to say. We're going to talk about this specialized unit.
Okay. Hey, well, Keith, before we go any further, I just want to remind those who are just now tuning into the podcast show that tonight's topic is how police brutality gets made. And where does that come from? And so throughout the podcast, we're going to be talking about where does that brutality come from within these officers of what we saw in the recent death of Tyre Nichols in Memphis. But before I go on, Keith, I got a video I want to play that is going to kind of segue into the how police brutality gets made.
Has delayed the funeral for Tyre Nichols. His family will now lay him to rest later this afternoon. The 29-year-old's death shocking the nation after the release of that video showing Memphis police officers violently beating him during a traffic stop. 5 former officers are facing second-degree murder charges, and this morning we're learning more about 2 of them. We do need to warn you, though, the story does contain disturbing video. ABC's Justin Finch is in Memphis.
Heavy hearts in Memphis for the final farewell of Tyre Nichols.
My brother was the most peaceful person you ever met in your life.
As Nichols' loved ones grieve the disciplinary backgrounds of some of the 5 fire police officers charged in his murder are coming into focus. The Memphis Police Department releasing administrative HR files of those former officers seen on video beating Nichols on January 7th.
Give us your hands!
4 of the 5 have records with suspensions or written reprimands, but none was previously found to have used excessive force. Demetrius Haley and Desmond Mills Jr. failed to file a, quote, response to resistance form after using physical force during arrest in 2021 and 2019. Justin Smith suspended for 2 days without pay in order to remedial driving training for striking a vehicle, causing it to spin out and strike another. Emmett Martin III, written up previously for failing to report a domestic violence case as required by law and not inspecting his squad car after a handgun was found on the rear floorboard. And to Darius Bean with no infractions filed on his records. ABC News obtaining an initial incident report from Nichols' arrest and finding stark inconsistencies between it and footage from police body cams and a surveillance camera. Among the biggest, the report does not mention Nichols being punched and kicked by several officers. And the state attorney not ruling out more officers could be held criminally liable as investigations here unfold. Justin Finch, ABC News, Memphis.
We'll be streaming that funeral live on all of our digital platforms today, including WHAS 11 Plus, our Roku app, and Fire TV. That'll begin today at 2 o'clock Eastern Time.
You know, Keith, and as we talk about how police
early intervention,
early event,
warning signs,
and again, you had a lot of warning signs, just like you did with Chauvin. With the Minneapolis Police Department, you had a lot of things that a lot of supervisors knew, probably even those above the level in the command staff, but nothing was done. And so, you know, when you talk about how police brutality gets made, it gets made because of the lack of oversight that's supposed to be there, but is not followed through. And this is another clear example of where out of the 5, only 1 officer did not have any type of disciplinary actions. And I believe he was fairly new to the department, maybe just a little over 2 years.
So Virgil, let me say this, man. How does police brutality get made? It gets made by someone who's lost their soul. Someone who has who thinks that they are above. The badge gives them courage. The badge gives them a level of being invincible. That we're going to, that, hey, this guy is out here doing something wrong, and yeah, I'm really saving this community from this bad guy because he's out here doing something wrong. But because he's doing something wrong and he has a criminal history, he's not human. So I'm going to dehumanize him and nobody's going to blame me for it. Well, that could have been done previously, but things have changed. So that stuff that you saw, to the listeners, the things that you saw in the report, regarding they fear for their safety, he was grabbing for the gun, he was grabbing for the taser. Those are things that certain field training officers and that teach hey, if you document a report like this will cover you for anything. You have to be able to articulate. So the articulation rises to the articulation that we're talking about is put his hand on my gun, he's trying to grab my gun. He's trying to do this, he's trying to do that. And as you all saw, none of that occurred. Now, people can say whatever they want to, whatever. There was nothing that this man did that justified, even if he had done something, even if there had been probable cause or reasonable.
It wouldn't have justified that.
It would not have justified the beating that he received. But it comes down to the fact of these officers felt that they had the right to do that. And we talk about these specialized units. I've developed specialized units and I have dissolved specialized units based on the fact of the need for it and not having the need for it. I disbanded a SWAT team and when I was in Lancaster because you had 5 officers that made up a SWAT team. Well, and they were training when they felt like training. So there was no consistent training as far as monthly training. There was no consistent attending outside training and things like that, training with weapons, training with other tactics. There was nothing. So I felt for the best interest of that community and that department and for the safety of the community and the officers, we disbanded and we did a mutual aid agreement with a local agency to do our SWAT call outs. I've started street crimes units. And the main thing was that I made it very clear that you had to have the right supervision. You had to have policies addressing that unit. They couldn't have a different mission or vision than the department. You had to have the right supervisors. And that meant the upper command supervisors, mid-level, first line. You had to have the right ones supervising those. And each one of those people in that unit, male or female, black, white, didn't matter, had to be individually interviewed. So it wasn't one of those where we just grab people and say, you look like you'll be a part. You need to look at their you need to look at their files, talk to supervisors, sit down and look at their disciplinary histories when you interview these individuals, so you would have questions. And then you made a decision based on overall, not just this guy's a go-getter, this girl's a go-getter.
Yeah.
You have to do that. You have to do that. You cannot just put people in units. You can't just put people in narcotics. You just can't put people in street crimes unit and SWAT teams. You can't just put people in detectives positions. People have to interview. There has to be a process so you can determine if this person is the right fit. And then even to determine if this person is the right fit, you have to come back at some time to determine if this person still needs to be a part of, is capable of being part of this unit. It's not a lifetime. These units should not be a lifetime assignment. So that's what happens when you put people in units, because number one, they've wrecked cars, and so they'll chase people, or man, they've been in this many, they had this many use of force reports, man, they'll defend you. They've been in this many shootouts where they'll shoot, or hey man, these people respect him because they know he'll slap them or he'll grab them. You can't put people in units like this, because a lot of times you're giving these officers the assignments and they're not going to be directly supervised. So you got to make sure you have the right people in right so that they know right and wrong. You have to, and the main part of all that, man, they have to have the right mental, be in the right mental state to do this.
Yeah. Well, hey, Keith, I want to remind everybody, if you're just now tuning into the podcast show, tonight's topic is how police brutality gets made. This is a follow-up from the incident that took place in Memphis where Tyre Nichols was killed by 5 Black police officers. And Keith, and as we talk about, how these officers get assigned to these specialized units, a couple of things I want to bring up. One is that these officers the selection process, it sounds like there wasn't a lot put into it. They really hadn't been on the street with the Memphis Police Department very long. The second thing I want to bring up is something that we've talked about in the past on the podcast show, is education. The Memphis Police Department has previously, they have reduced their college requirements. So you don't have to have an associate's degree, or you don't have to have a bachelor's degree. And a lot of agencies, because there's a struggle to recruit people, that has, you've seen agencies hire people who typically they wouldn't have hired because of the education requirement. I don't believe any of these guys had any type of degrees, because it's stated that in some reports, some of them, I think some of them did.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, some did, and some didn't. And also, Keith, I want to throw this in there to you and to those who are listening. The city of Memphis, as we know, is predominantly, African American city, kind of like Atlanta. The police department is primarily made up of Black police officers, and I think the second are Latino officers. So I think I pulled up something that was about 65% African American. And I'm going to ask you this, Keith. Does this have anything to do with the makeup of the department and how historically things have been with this agency, and the fact that crime has always been bad? Here we are. We really, we can't, hey, let's just hire these guys and let's get them in and let's train them. Does any of that really play into what we saw these 5 officers do? Because you got to ask yourself, how do you get that angry at a person that you supposedly pulled over from a traffic stop? And I got to go back to something, Keith, and I don't know if you noticed this. If this was a traffic stop, they were all in unmarked cars, but one of the unmarked cars was actually pulled in front of his vehicle at the intersection.
See, that's the thing I'm talking about, Virgil. It comes back to tactics. That's tactics. That's just one of many things that were wrong with this whole situation.
And nobody's really talking about that, because it's like, why, if this guy was weaving in and out of traffic as you supposedly said he was, why is one of the units parked in front of him to block him from going anywhere? And there again, Keith, these guys are in unmarked cars, so there's a lot of people running around with fake who are pretending to be the police. So you don't know. And I think, somebody made a comment earlier that, well, I think, Pam said that during Al Sharpton's eulogy, said that we have to be afraid of the cops and the robbers. How do you know?
Well, let me say this. You ask a question about education, and I came from a department that required a 4-year degree, and that worked for me. And for many years, I really thought that there was only one way to do that you had to have a 4-year degree. But then if that's the case, I think it gets down to, are you saying because you don't have a 4-year degree, I'm not at the same level, or I'm not on the same level as someone with a degree? So this is a profession that I do not believe you have to have a degree. After many years of thinking that, and then after becoming a chief and seeing some of the amazing officers that come through law enforcement that don't have a degree, or they're working on their degrees, whether they're working on them or they have them, they're working on them, or they get them later in life. I have a lot of respect for that. That had nothing to do with this, Virgil. This had to do with power. This had to do with anger. This was personal. And no matter what the rumors out there, whatever it was about the man's personal life, but this was personal. It was as if they were so mad at this person that they were mad at something or someone, and they could not get to that person they were upset with. So this man happened to be the target. He happened to be, it's like they took so much frustration, years and years of frustration out on this person. That's why you can't make me believe that there was not a connection there somewhere. Something had to have happened, because there was so much anger. I mean, to the point these guys were, even after a guy had got sprayed with mace and he was incapacitated, he took the time to rinse his eyes, wash his face, get back in the car, and then go down to the scene and inflict pain. That in itself, man, is that's sociopathic. That's really right there is psychopathic. When you zone out like that and you're doing that, that is a sign of a person who has no respect for anyone's safety, life, or whatever. It wouldn't have mattered. I don't think it would have mattered if those guys would have had a 4-year degree from Harvard. I don't think it would have mattered if they were PhD. That's an individual thing, man.
Yeah. Well,
the only way that would not have happened, Virgil, with those guys, if they had not been working at the Memphis Police Department at that time. That's the only way those guys would not have been involved in that situation. Mm-hmm. You would have had to they would have had to have been off duty at that time, okay? Mm-hmm. Or not working for the Memphis Police Department at all at that time. That's the only way that would have been happening. That was going to happen eventually to somebody.
Well, let me say, is it Myra? Myrna. She makes a comment, and I think there's some truth behind this here. Time will reveal that there is more to this situation than what we know.
There's more to it, man.
There is more to one of these. I mean, I'm not going to say what has been put out on other social media platforms.
Those guys took anger.
There's been some other information that's been put out there, and we don't know. We'll see if that information comes out to be truthful or not. But there has to be some other connection with one of the 5 to Tyre Nichols.
There has to be something, and like you said, man.
Let me ask you this question. First of all, you're saying you're supposed to be on this special detail. Why did you target that one car? Why didn't you target another car? So I don't want to get into speculation, but you have to have an open mind to say there was something about Tyre Nichols that one of these guys, there was something there. And I think hopefully if nothing comes out of it, maybe it doesn't, but I think there are some other things that's going to come out over a period of time.
Well, Virgil, of course it was personal because Virgil, how many foot chases have you, car pursuits, foot chases have you been involved where you just have to let the person go?
A whole lot.
And when I was a supervisor, I would tell them, we got the car, we got the name, we're going to Yeah. I mean, that's just, it was let the guy go. You got the car. Now, the other part of this that people are forgetting, not talking about, we are finding that there was a supervisor on scene.
Yeah. Yeah. That was over this. I don't know if he
shoot it. So this gentleman has put in his papers to retire because he knows what's going to happen. He was standing there when that was occurring, or he never intervened as a supervisor.
Yeah,
he could be held at a higher level of liability or culpability than those other guys.
Yeah,
because as a supervisor, man, as a first line, I've always told, and that's one of the things I think we talked about last week. I've always told my guys when I was a supervisor, especially first line supervisor, if you get involved in a foot chase or a carpet chase, I'm going to be there. Because I know how adrenaline gets to flowing. I know how people get tunnel vision. I know how people get angry and the emotions and take over. And I've seen that. And so as a supervisor, when your officers are in a volatile, I don't like to say volatile, but in a situation that could rise to the level of urgency, a pursuit, foot pursuit, person with a weapon, as a supervisor, you have a responsibility, an obligation to go to that scene.
Yeah.
To ensure that things are run. So when you, and I used to tell officers all the time, you looked at these officers' history, and some of the history was not doing a domestic violence report. Okay. Let me tell you why. That says a lot. Yeah. Let me tell you why people don't do domestic violence report. Because number one, this is not all officers. I'm not going to throw a blanket over all officers. Let me just say this. It happens because it's not exciting enough. If I take 15 to 20 to 25 minutes to do this report, I'm missing some of the action out here. Yeah. And they said they're saying that they're not going to do anything, so I'm going to take their word, and they don't do a report. And I would really be interested to see what these guys' early intervention looks like. And for you all out here that are listening, early intervention programs inside the departments, where there are, after so many notifications of use of force, of missing work, or car pursuits, or other infractions, the supervisor is notified, and that supervisor is obligated to meet with that officer just to kind of talk with them, to see what's going on. It may not be anything. It may not be anything bad, but just to kind of get to know their officers to see what's actually going on. Yeah. It is the most underutilized tool in law enforcement. And police departments will tell you that they have that program, but when you sit down with them, there is a debate on, well, what goes into the system? Well, how many is too many? There's no consistency. And so it is easy for an officer to fly under the radar. There is an opportunity for an officer to fly under the radar. Yeah. Well, hey, Keith, I want to get to one of the comments in the chat where Pam says, and I don't know, Pam, if this is correct. I know the white officer who tased him, I don't believe he's been fired. I believe he was placed on administrative leave. Right. I could be wrong for that, Keith. I think that is correct. Right? I think I think he was placed on leave. And they got more officers that they placed on leave. Yeah, and then you've got the three Memphis Fire Department personnel who
who were relieved of duty, which I believe they were terminated.
They were terminated.
Yeah.
So let me say, Chanel asked a question. She has a good question. She said, so it's safe to say that although the chief acted and terminated them, but was well aware of their behavior before now and covered it up? Absolutely not. Because someone receives days off does not mean that they're not eligible to go to other units. And you have to understand, when you have the chief's, chief is responsible for everything that goes on in their organization, absolutely. But the chief doesn't know what everybody's personnel file looks like. The chief doesn't know that. The chief doesn't make every decision when it comes to putting people in units and things like that. Not when it comes to your line level. So no, it doesn't mean that they covered anything up. And you have to understand too, a lot of this stuff isn't releasable.
It's protected.
It's not releasable based on state laws and things like that. But no, by no means, knowing CJ Davis, no way CJ would have allowed anybody to be in that unit that she didn't think. I guarantee you that it was based on, you give me the good guys, that you give me some people that can make this happen. Because the main focus of that unit was violent crimes.
Well, you also got to remember, Keith, I mean, CJ she's only been at Memphis, 2 years, maybe?
3 years.
3? Yeah. So she's still learning the department and the command staff that she has. And all of those people have been there well before she got there. So she's really relying upon their expertise and their information about these officers, who's good, who's bad, or however that is evaluated. So they're you really just can't put it off on the chief. Right. But I will say this, for you and I both know this, is that if you got some people in your command staff that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you gotta make some decisions, those are the things that you look at. And I think Memphis is a very large police department that you got to look at to see, do you have the right people in there, and should you put some other people in there, because this is going to be a fallout from, you've already got a supervisor who is going to take this early retirement. And I think there's going to be some other people who were, I want to say, really implicit. They probably knew some things, but just probably ignored it, because the culture, you got to just look at the deep culture of an agency like Memphis. And Memphis has the first 48.
All police departments, man.
All of it. But Memphis has always been out because of the first 48. And you go back to Armstrong when he was a part of the detective division. Then he became the police chief. So they've been in the news a lot, as well as just with the crime. So I think Pam has got a comment. She said, if the prosecutor can prove intent, it's likely the officer will be charged with first-degree murder. I think that's going to be a hard deal because on laws.
Well, that's why they didn't do.
That's why they didn't, because
they could not prove the intent, or the intent premeditated.
Yeah.
So that's why they went with second degree. That was the safest charge, to the highest charge that they could prove. It's going to be very difficult to prove intent.
Hey, Keith, I got something I want to show, because it goes to what we're actually talking about with supervisors.
This police sergeant on the run, trying to keep away from our cameras as he bonded out of the Broward County Jail. That officer was arrested for this video here that made headlines, showing him grabbing a female officer by the throat.
Local 10's Christian De La Rosa was there when he walked out of jail and joins us live with the details. Christian.
This investigation took 8 months, and you might remember it wasn't until after we exposed this case that this sergeant went from desk duty to being suspended with pay. Fast forward to today, his arrest, but he still has his job. He's a cop bonding out of jail and running away from our cameras. He is Sergeant Christopher Police, a 21-year-old veteran of the Sunrise Police Department. This is his mugshot, and this is he grabbing a fellow officer, a woman, by the throat. This police body camera footage is from November 2021. Sunrise police officers were responding to the scene of a fight. The man they put in handcuffs was being uncooperative and threatening.
If I open fire on 1, 2, and 3.
The video shows officers struggling to put their suspect, John Similian, in the back of a unit. It's when Sergeant Police comes in. He's seen reportedly pointing pepper spray at the suspect and is heard making threats.
You want to play? You ever get disrespectful with my officers? I will remove your soul from your body.
The woman officer moves in, grabbing the sergeant by his belt and pulling him back before he goes for her neck. Police briefly walks away but comes back saying this.
Everybody turn off their cameras.
Arresting documents we obtained show he's now charged with battery on law enforcement, tampering with evidence, assault on a law enforcement officer, and assault. The Sunrise Police Department sending us this statement saying in part, further determination with regards to the employment of Sergeant Police will be made in accordance with Florida State Statute, due process, and the collective bargaining agreement. The officer that was grabbed by the throat, she has not been identified. Live in Fort Lauderdale, I'm Christian De La Rosa. Local.
You know, Keith, I wanted to show that video because here's a sergeant. What's really disturbing is the fact that he walks away, he walks back, and he tells everybody to turn off their body cameras, and that's exactly what everybody did. The only female who grabbed him and tried to pull him away as she knew she was doing the right thing, but nobody stepped up to her defense. And then when he tells them, which violates their policy, turn off your body cameras, the first female officer you see, that's what she reached and done. So there's the power and control that these supervisors have over these officers, to where if I don't do what my sergeant says, then I mean, I'm going to be out of here, or I'm going to have some problems.
Well, he's a bully. There's no doubt that's not the first time. He's a bully. I guarantee those officers were afraid of him. But she basically said, hey, you know, this isn't right. And she gets assaulted because she's trying to do the right thing. And he goes completely off. Now, I will tell you right now, that may have been one of those situations where it'd be on site. You know what on site is?
On site mean we finna roll.
I don't know if I could have because man, he choked her.
He choked her.
He choked her.
But what was disturbing is the fact that none of the officers came to aid her.
They did not. They did not do that. And man, this dude's yelling and screaming, and I mean he came. So that comes down to just go back to.
Let's go back to the Nichols.
To the Nichols situation.
Yeah.
To the listeners, that's how easy it is for somebody to get out of control that's wearing a gun and a badge.
Yeah.
If they have other issues going on.
And Keith, he arrived after the subject had been handcuffed, put in the back seat.
Under control.
They had it under control. But he used his aggression. He was already angry when he drove up there, angry when he got out the car, angry when he approached the car. And then for him to say he was going to rip his soul out, his I can't use that word.
Your soul.
I'm a rip out of your body, something like that.
You're probably saying it very appropriate.
Yeah.
But that goes back to take that and then understand how
what happened in Memphis.
How these situations happen based on individuals. And I've always said it. I wish we did have a test that could reveal everybody with this, hiring these. There are things that show up pre-employment. There are things that show up early past, after employment. But there are those that get, and that's why I said, please don't be surprised that these individuals that committed this offense were African American. Don't be surprised.
Keith, I think that's what people say.
All the time.
Yeah. Well, and it's not, and like I said, Keith, there was a video, on a previous podcast that I showed. I think I showed this video where a Atlanta sergeant had kicked a black female in the face who was already handcuffed. It was not caught on a body cameras. A citizen some distance away caught this, and eventually he was terminated and he was fired. But what was most disturbing about that, Keith, was there was a black female officer standing right by him, and she saw her sergeant kick another woman in the face, and she didn't do a single thing. And I've asked this question. We need to have a very serious conversation in the black community about black police officers. We always talk about when a white officer kills somebody. We've got some good black police officers, we've got some good white police officers just as well as Latino. But you've got some black cops who you would sit there and think, oh, they would never do that. What happened in Memphis happens in a whole lot of other police departments that are predominantly black. And I worked in a city in Arkansas, and they had a unit that the citizens labeled as the Jump Out Boys. And the stories that I heard about how this unit treated black people, I'm just like, how is it that nobody was really charged with the crime?
No comment.
So Keith, we got another comment, from in the chat room. It says, because the behavior expressed is what he has done for many years, a complete bully. She was following the guidelines and the oath that she has taken as a peace officer. I'll let you read the comment from Chanel.
Well, she said just like a lot of bullying goes on within police departments. There is internal and external bullying that goes on in law enforcement. And we always want to always put this disclaimer out here. We're not talking about the majority of law enforcement. No. By no means are we talking about the majority. We're talking about a small percentage that causes us to have to talk about these topics. And that's what upsets me when I hear people, you can basically say, we're not talking about everybody, but there's this belief that you can't even talk about the bad guys because now you're anti-police.
You're anti-police.
That's not the case. So
yeah. Well, and Keith, again, just like I asked you the question at the beginning of the podcast, man, is it because of you've got people who are of this race are saying that how dare you say something about police officers? Well, and because then now all of a sudden you're labeled as being anti-cop when we talk about, hey, we're spending too much money on this, we should be doing this, or hey, now you guys are saying that these officers are guilty before they were even, charged with something. We're not saying none of that. The video speaks for itself, Keith. All the videos.
But when you have the mindset that everybody's against you and that you have to stick together no matter what, that in itself can be a problem. Yeah.
Well, hey, Keith, man, we're coming up on the last minutes of the podcast show. We want to thank everybody for tuning in and joining another informative topic on You and the Law podcast show, brothers. It's always good to get with you and to talk with our listeners, man, and have these informative conversations.
Yeah, and before we go, Virg, I'd like to send a prayer out to the city of Memphis. They had an officer critically injured. I haven't gotten an update. Extremely critical condition earlier from being shot. So I want to reach out to them. But I just want to say this just really quickly, too. I want everybody, and I've said this before, I want everybody to find out what's actually going on within your police department. And base your opinions based on, after you sit down with the police chief or whomever and talk to them, I hope we give you questions you can answer, but don't lump every police officer in the nation in with the few that do the things like what happened here in Memphis or what happened in Florida and things like that. You have hardworking men, women of various ethnicities, genders, socioeconomic came from different levels of socioeconomic, various levels of religious backgrounds and so forth, that do this job because they want to do the right thing, and they're doing the right thing. But it takes this one incident to tarnish the entire. But I want you all to know, this profession is an amazing profession. There's amazing people working, and just like you all are upset and pissed off about what happened, you have millions of officers, hundreds of thousands of officers that are pissed off about what they saw also. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, hey, we want to let everybody know, definitely tune in next Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time for, as always, a hot topic on You and the Law podcast show. And make sure you tune in to see what kind of, whatever kind of hat Chief Swaggy one is wearing. We'll definitely be entertained. We will definitely be entertained by the bearded man that goes by the name of Chief Swaggy one with his hats. So until next Thursday, we will see everybody. Have a good week, and we'll see you on Thursday at 6 p.m. on You and the Law podcast show.